morning, friends. Welcome to the eighth lecture in this series of lectures on basics of neutron scattering. Uh, in the last lecture, I was taking you through the diffraction techniques in the basics of neutron scattering, and I showed you the data from a typical powder diffraction instrument. And if you remember, I talked about a range of typically around 10 angstrom in. And I also showed you some data, which was the Rietveld fitted data on some magnetic structure. So for diffraction, I have gone it as per priority of most of the researchers. The most sought after technique for many of you will be magnetic neutron diffraction to get the magnetic structure of your sample. And mostly we work on powder samples, mostly, not all. Next part of the diffraction, which I couldn't discuss last time, the diffraction from liquid and amorphous systems. Over here, neutrons do have an edge over all other techniques because of its deep penetrability in mediums. And I will, at the moment, I'll be discussing it pretty briefly. There's a problem regarding connecting to network. Okay. So diffraction on liquids. Now, when it comes to liquids and amorphous systems, they are slightly different in the sense dynamically in liquid, atoms and molecules are moving around, we know. And in a liquid, this dynamics is one part which can be studied, which I'll get out later. In amorphous solids, like say plastic or some other material, amorphous solids, they're frozen. But both of them, if I look at a time average picture, for liquids, it's the time average picture, and in solids is a frozen structure. We do have local structure, not local, I should say short range structure. It's very important to understand that in liquids and amorphous solids also we have short range structure, and how the diffraction pattern looks, I will try to show you that. This is the liquid and amorphous diffractometer LAD in Dhruva reactor, but similar instruments are available in all the major neutron sources. Here you are seeing from the other side, so from the this is the monochromator drum, which is a common feature for most of our instruments, and this what you see is a number of neutron detectors, position sensitive detectors, which are sitting here. And it has got a, in this particular case, this has got a wide range of angle, and the sample sits here. This is a sample table. Now, why wider range of angle compared to diffraction? Let's probe that a little bit more. You see, in case of liquid and amorphous material, this is a liquid, propanol, H-bonded liquid. Here, please look at the experimental data. Here, the one is the Q range. It is 16 angstrom inverse. And another one is the structure of the peaks. How does it compare with a typical diffraction pattern? You have seen, all of you have seen X-ray. Also, I showed you neutron. You have sharp peaks like this going over to Q. Here, the first peak is sharp, the second peak is diffuse, the third peak is even more diffuse. So, this is what I mean by the short range order in case of liquids and amorphous solid. So I can give an example. If you have a liquid made of, let us say, ionic liquid of AB, that makes it easier. So if you consider if I have an A, then if I go very close by, there will be a shell with B. Now, in case of liquids, these B atoms are not fixed; they're moving around. But at any time, if I take a snapshot, there will be a shell like this. If I go further out, there will be an A shell, surely. But since it's a liquid, and this shell will be more diffuse compared to the first shell. If you go further out, this shell will be further diffuse. And if you go to R equal to infinity, this will be completely diffuse. It will not go to zero, it will go the liquid density, average density rho of R. Now, if I look at the pair correlation function for the liquid, I'm sorry, there was some internet disturbance, so we lost some time. So I will try to repeat what I was trying to tell you. So I was talking about structure in liquid and amorphous systems. Now, in this liquid and amorphous systems, we don't have long range order, we know, but we have short range order. For liquids, it's a time average structure, and for solids, it's a time frozen structure. But both of them have got short range order, which is of interest to many of us. And this is the instrument which I showed you, which is at Dhruva reactor. I explained to you that there is a monochromator drum, which is very common for all of these. The neutron beam comes out by this path. The sample is here, and you have a detector bank. Now, in case of liquids and amorphous systems, I can tell you that since there is only short range order, we need to go to larger Q values. Now, in this instrument, as I pointed it out to you earlier also, that we can go up to typically up to 15 to 16 angstrom inverse. And as I was mentioning you that in case of liquids and amorphous systems, we don't have long range order, but I was at this point, but the G of R shows a Hart sphere core where you don't have any pair correlation there, then it rises. There is a first sharp peak which gives the short range order. After that, you have the second shell, then you have the third shell, then fourth shell, and slowly you will reach the liquid or average density with the liquid and amorphous system. So this is typically the short range order that you see, and this can be as low less than 1 angstrom. And because you are trying to look at structures which are around 1 angstrom or smaller than that, in your Q space, in our discussion again and again I mentioned that you need to go to larger Q. And that's what is shown in this transparency, that we can, where we could go up to 10 or 8 angstrom inverse in the normal diffraction structure, but here we are going up to 15 16 angstrom inverse. Actually, in case of liquid and amorphous system, the farther you can go the better, and you can go up to 50 angstrom inverse in Rutherford Appleton laboratory. Reason being that this involves a Fourier transform over Q, and often if you don't have a structure to go by, then you have to do a direct Fourier transform and get the information about G of R, and that necessitates that I am able to go to as large a Q value as I can. So to go to large Q values, there are two ways, of course, because Q is given by when theta is half the scattering angle. So either you can go to large angles, combined with you should be able to get smaller wavelengths or more energetic neutrons. Now in a reactor source, the number of more energetic neutrons are less. So, but if you go to a spallation neutron source, the neutrons are produced with very, very high energy. This can go as large as 100 mega electron volts. Reason being, here uh, a beam of protons with 1 GeV energy hits a target, and the target boils off. The reaction is known as spallation, and that's why it's a spallation neutron source, and neutrons of very high energy comes out. Of course, we use moderators to bring the energy of these neutrons down, but still uh, spallation neutron source is more rich with high energy neutrons, and such studies will be better if you can go to a spallation neutron source. This brings me to a point which I want to share with you, that in the Maxwellian that we have got, which was talking to you about the thermal spectrum, it tapers off in both direction. If you go in energy, in high energy as well as in the low energy, this Maxwellian tapers off. And if I need neutrons from here or neutrons from here, I am really handicapped because the number is small. Because as such, I was telling you again and again that a reactor has a maximum flux which is much smaller compared to any other radiation sources. So that there are some tricks which I'll just mention here, because this detailed description of these systems will be beyond the purview of this course. But what can I do now? Since this is a Maxwellian. One thing one can do, that in the reactor there is a core, and this core there are cavities made. In this cavity, I can keep a moderator which is at a lower temperature or at a higher temperature. So I'll just mention here, there is something called a cold neutron source. Cold neutron source is not really a source in that sense. All it does actually, it captures neutrons, the reactor neutrons. In Dhruva, these reactor neutrons are at typically around 50 degrees centigrade. It captures them, and then any other reactor also typically at this temperature. And since this is at a lower temperature, so it rethermalizes these neutrons, and a new Maxwellian emerges from the cold neutron source. And this new Maxwellian, while the total number of neutrons is not changed because the area under the curve remains same, it is just a question of rethermalization. But you can see that in the lower energies, you have gain, you have gains. So this is the purpose of a cold neutron source, and this cold neutron source is often liquid hydrogen. This is more of a general knowledge for you at the moment. The liquid hydrogen is used at around 20 Kelvin. Similarly, if I have to boost the number of neutrons at the higher energy, I can also put a moderator at a higher temperature. And usually this is a graphite block. So these graphite blocks actually, like this one cools the neutrons, this one heats them up, heats heats up. And the neutron which emerges from this graphite block, this will be at a higher temperature. The Maxwellian Boltzmann is shifted and you have gains over here. These are important devices. So I told you about beam lines. I told you about guides for cold neutrons. And now I told you how we can increase the number of cold neutrons using cold neutron sources. These are common in reactor based sources. Unfortunately, in India, we still have not mastered the technology of cold neutron sources. We don't have it. But if we have it, we can boost the neutron flux by 7 or factor of 7 to 20, and this will help us to do our experiments much more comfortably. This is something I want to share with you. Now, we go back. So, in case of liquid and amorphous systems, as I was telling you, it is necessary to go to a large Q value so that one thing, we may do a direct Fourier transform to get the G of R. That is what the physical parameter of importance, of interest. Like here, I have just taken some random examples of what we did. So it was a hydrogen bonded alcohol, and they found out the hexamer rings in this open chain clusters, tetramer rings in this system. Another example I had taken is everywhere you see we can go to a very large Q value, and we can see a pre-peak, and these have been fitted by some technique, and this structure, the short range order structure, has been determined. I must mention that even in case of liquid and amorphous system, it is not always necessary to go from the Fourier space or Q space to real space by a direct Fourier transform, but there are other techniques. One of them is known as reverse Monte Carlo. Some of you are probably familiar with the Monte Carlo techniques where we can simulate a stochastic process using random numbers. In reverse Monte Carlo process, actually you start with some kind of a structure of the arrangement of the atoms or molecules in real space, and then you stochastically or randomly keep moving it, look at its Fourier transform, which is a experimental result just like Rietveld fitting, and keep doing this stochastic change of the structure till you get a good fit. Like as you can see here, the fit has been obtained from reverse Monte Carlo. This is quite popular among the liquid and amorphous materials people. So like Rietveld is popular among people who try to obtain the crystallographic structures. Reverse Monte Carlo is extremely popular among the people who are working in the liquid and amorphous fields. So possibly this topic will be taken up in more details during the next module of talks on diffraction. This is a brief introduction to liquid and amorphous systems. So one, we need to go to larger Q values for liquid and amorphous systems. So larger Q values are obtained by larger angle or by high energy neutrons or shorter lambda, because Q is given by 4 pi by lambda sine theta. Next, uh, to get the real space structure, still modeling can be done using techniques like reverse Monte Carlo in case of liquid and amorphous systems. Next, I would like to bring your attention to single crystal diffraction. Now, if we don't know anything about a structure, then we need to solve it ab initio. And for ab initio structure, we can't do with powder. So there are cases when you need to go for single crystal growth, and that single crystal diffraction is necessary to get the ab initio structure. But here I am just showing you the sample table, nothing else. Reason being, the biggest difference is here between a powder diffractometer and a single crystal diffractometer. In case of powder diffractometer, you don't have this thing. This is known as a four circle goniometer. Four circle goniometer. This you don't need for powders. You need in single crystal. Why? Let me explain to you. In case of powder crystals, we have this sample, and there is for every d spacing, because all possible orientation of crystallites, you have got a cone, which is another Debye-Scherrer cone, and your detector cuts a part of this cone depending on the thickness of the detector which is placed. So you don't need any goniometer on the sample table, because anyway the you have a cone in angles around the incoming beam, around the incoming wave vector you have a cone, and a part of that cone is intercepted by the detector, and you get the diffraction profile. In case of a single crystal, you don't have a cone. So you are aware that K minus K prime should be equal to Q, which must be equal to a reciprocal lattice vector in case of a crystal. So if I look at the reciprocal lattice vector, let me just do it for you. If we have a reciprocal lattice here, if the K vector, I plot it in a way that it ends on one lattice, then whenever the scattered beam, which is a, because the energy is same, so I am maybe wrong, it's part of a circle, or in 3 dimension part of a sphere, whenever the scattered beam or the g vector intercepts the vector g, because this is vectorially, you can see that if this is the incident vector k, this is the reflected, let me just be a little cleaner. So I have this reciprocal lattice vector. This is the reciprocal lattice. A k vector ends here. Whenever the reflected beam is like this, whenever k and k prime, this is a reciprocal lattice vector, intercept the reciprocal lattice vector, then you will have a reflected beam. So in reciprocal space, that means in angle space, whenever k minus k prime equal to g, maybe one reciprocal lattice vector here, whenever k minus k prime equal to g, you will have a scattered beam. So this is known as Ewald construction. So now you can imagine for a three-dimensional crystal, these reciprocal lattice vectors are also spread out over a sphere, and the direction is not in the plane of the experiment. So that is where the need for a goniometer comes, because in that case I need to orient the crystal in such a way that the reflected beam comes to this plane, because a neutron detector cannot be put anywhere in the space. It's heavy, it needs to be shielded. So we prefer that the neutron detector moves on an horizontal arc around the sample. So this is actually the detector arm, which you can see. It is moving in a horizontal arc around the sample, and this goniometer brings the reflected beam down to the horizontal direction. And in this case, because it is a single crystal, the scattered pattern is very, very, very intense. This is almost like a perfect delta function. I'm sorry, it looks like a curved line, but what I mean is that, uh, let me see. This is actually what I mean is it's a perfect delta function. So in this case, though hydrogen is a very strong incoherent scatterer, and I warned you that in case of powder diffraction, don't use a hydrogenous crystal. But here, because it is a single crystal, and whenever the reflection comes, reflection is very, very, very strong. So we can ignore the incoherent background and we can use hydrogenous crystals. And this is a very big advantage of single crystal neutron diffraction to find out structure of organic crystals, large organic crystals, because you can use hydrogenous crystals and uh, at least inside us, using single crystal diffraction, the structure of amino acids, a large number of amino acids were solved. And now also the single crystal diffraction machine is used to find out the structure of organic crystals mostly. Of course, I must tell you here that when you go to protein crystals, then you have to go to a synchrotron, and neutron is not of much help. So structure of proteins can be done using X-ray crystallography in a synchrotron source, but large organic crystals, their structure can be found out using single crystal neutron diffraction. And even today, routinely organic crystals, organic single crystals, they're easier to grow also somewhat, can be studied using single crystal diffraction. So this is a part of the suite of instruments that I am trying to show you. Now I am going into the new world altogether. This is the low Q world. So now I will be talking about structures. So far I have been talking about crystallographic structure or short range correlations in liquid and amorphous systems. So we have talked about single crystal, we talked about powder crystal, and now I'll be discussing with you about the low Q or low angle. So in ordinary parlance, it is called small angle neutron scattering. Small angle is basically small q. So the term is very common term is sans. And those of you who are in metallurgy, close to biology, chemistry, even sometimes even working on natural samples like rocks, many of such people they come to small angle neutron scattering to find out structure at mesoscopic length scale. The term is mesoscopic length scale. So if I may point out that our life starts with macroscopic length scale. Everything, every object around us is macroscopic. Our eyes can see resolutions, close ones, few millimeters, meters. When we go down in size, we go to mesoscopic structures. And further going down will take us to the microscopic structures. I started my discussion with crystallography, so started from here, but there's a whole class of experiments which works at mesoscopic length scale. Typically, I would say 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer size. This range, so 10 angstrom to 1000 angstrom, zero point 0.1 micron, this is the range which can be addressed using mesoscopic length scale. Now again, we can use the uncertainty relationship, and then if I talk about 10 nanometer length scale or 100 nanometer length scale, I need to go to lower and lower Q ranges. So lower and lower Q ranges, there are interesting to say, but you must realize that lower Q ranges are happening when I'm able to use longer lambda or I'm able to go to smaller angle. Now, both ways there are challenges. Reason being, longer lambda means in the Maxwellian, I need to go to smaller energies, which makes that my intensity is low. And smaller theta means if this is the direct beam, if I go to smaller and smaller theta, how small can I go? Because when I look at my direct beam has got a width in theta, it is not a perfect delta function. So that will dictate how small in theta I am able to go. So these are the challenges for the small q world. So we have to tighten the collimation of your beam to make the direct beam narrower. When you do that, you sacrifice neutrons. Secondly, when you go to longer wavelength, you don't have too many neutrons, so already you have smaller number of neutrons, and then you are further reducing them by collimation, so you have intensity issues. That's why people use small angle scattering instruments on a cold neutron source. With this much of introduction, let me now go to the instruments. Another technique which is routinely used, and actually that is the technique which I have been using for last 20 years, is the structure of thin films. Thin films are something which are artifacts to start with, made by deposition techniques, various deposition techniques. And today, lot of physics, interesting physics is done, because thin films are so thin that their properties differ from their bulk properties. Also, there are devices made from thin films, and we need to understand how magnetically they behave, when you are using thin films. So that study, those studies can be taken up using specular and off specular neutron reflectometry. So there are two techniques in the low Q side. One is the small angle neutron scattering, other one is the neutron reflectometry. So first, the most popular one, the most popular technique possibly today, next to magnetic crystallography, is small angle neutron scattering. What I show here is the small angle neutron scattering machine at Dhruva on the guide. So let me just quickly tell you that the neutron beam flows down the guide, and there is a this is a shielding, inside which at the back there is a one dimensional position sensitive detector which detects the angle neutron for the over an angular range. This is an old photograph. My apologies for this. We use not a monochromator today, but what is known as a velocity selector to select the neutron wavelength. A little bit of comment on that. In case of small angle neutron scattering, because lambda is long, I can relax my delta lambda to get the same resolution in lambda. So here, I told you earlier that to get a monochromatic beam, I put a crystal in the beam path, and through Bragg reflection, I choose one particular lambda. But there is a mechanical device which will have a poorer resolution, which is somewhat like this. It's a cylinder. It's a cylinder on the surface of which you have made a spiral. So spirals are there on the surface of which, my drawing is not so good. So if you see, there will be spirals. So there are spirals going round the surface of the cylinder, and there is not one spiral, but so there will be series of spiral slots in this velocity selector. Now what it does actually, you see, if I rotate this cylinder around this axis, then you can see the neutron is traveling in a straight line path. In this rotating frame, this neutron will have a helical path. And if that helical path matches with these slots, then you get a neutron of certain wavelength plus a distribution of wavelength because of the width of these slots. So depending on the velocity of this velocity selector, the velocity selector is basically a new name for our wavelength selector. And this neutron, small angle neutron device, it has a velocity selector, and depending on the speed of the velocity selector, we can choose specific wavelength and with a reasonable spread with which we can do our experiments. So this is an instrument which has a velocity selector, and this instrument is dedicated to understand mesoscopic length scale structure. For example, structure interaction of micelles. Now, I mentioned you earlier that when you have surfactant molecules and you keep putting them in solution or in a liquid base, then at some point, because it has got a hydrophilic head, hydrophilic head, and this is the head, and a tail which is hydrophobic, it will try to keep itself away from the water if it is in the water medium, and they form something called a surfactant. Now these surfactants are technologically very important material, and it is important to understand the size and structure of these micelles. And in that instrument, a large number of micellar structures were attempted. You can see that this micelle size is typically 25 angstrom to 100 angstrom length scale. So, in this length scale, if you want to probe something, then small angle neutron scattering is the only way. Similarly, block copolymers. Block copolymers have the similar property. It might form, it might have a portion which is hydrophilic and a portion which is hydrophobic. And when you put a large number of such polymers inside a medium, they also can form micelles, and it is important to understand the structure. The people who are in chemistry uh, and working on such structures, or even if you have, as I told you earlier, if you have a precipitate of certain alloy in a system which is slightly different in density, then you can use small angle neutron scattering to get the size, shape, or even with time how these grow, because there is something called, I think, oswald ripening of such precipitates. So how the shapes change with annealing, all these things you can understand. So I'll just, instead of going into the detailed discussion, one module is there in this lecture series which will be discussing small angle neutron scattering. I'll just like to share with you how the data looks like. You see, this is some name P85 micelles and plus SDS micelles, mixed micelles, surfactants, contrast matched. I will try to quickly tell you what it is. First, look at the data. You see, I will mention to you earlier, I talked to you about 0 to 10 angstrom inverse. For liquid and amorphous, I talked about 0 to 15 angstrom inverse in Dhruva, but you can go up to 50 angstrom inverse in this. Here, you look at the Q range. The Q range is between 0 and zero point 0.4 angstrom inverse. This is because the uncertainty relation that I used earlier, that the real space resolution is dictated by the Q range that you can see maximum. So these experiments are inherently designed to look at large structure. And when we talk about large structure, we cannot talk about we cannot talk about crystallographic points. Rather, we talk in terms of a density. We talk in terms of density, and we talk in terms of contrast matching in density. So this density is what? This density is coherent scattering length density. Coherent scattering length density in the medium. So basically, you find out from the number density, and you really find out, like for example, if it is H2O, then you have to find out 2 into B coherent of H plus 1 into B coherent of oxygen. So this is for one H2O molecule, and then you have to find out numbers from Avogadro's number per unit volume, numbers per unit volume. Very simple task. And then you can talk about rho, this which is a scattering length per, it will be per Barnes per unit volume. So interestingly, for neutron, we have the scattering length of hydrogen is negative, and scattering length of deuterium is positive. So I can add H2O and D2O, and you can work out in what ratio. You can even make the rho equal to 0, rho scattering length density equal to 0, but always you don't make it 0. Suppose I have some object which I want to study. I can make a part of it as visible and rest of it invisible. And then I can do small angle neutron scattering. The small angle neutron scattering I will see. So in a H2O D2O mixed media, I can put a micelle. I can make I can make this contrast match with this part. Then what neutron, small angle neutron scattering will see only this small part. Or I can do vice versa. I can make an H2D2 mixture and make, let us say, this part match with this part. In that case, your neutron scattering will probe a shell of outer body, and this is extremely beneficial. Not only that, neutron is sensitive to smaller q values, smaller, sorry, lower z values, but it can also, using contrast matching in small angle neutron scattering, sort of we can light up different parts of my system and look at it. This is a very big advantage of uh, small angle, like and they have shown here in this medium that the surfactants can be contrast match. And what is this information that we are looking at? Just I'll give a very short answer. You see, we talked about form factor. We talked about form factor earlier. If you remember, I told you that in case of X-rays, depending on the size of an atom, the Fourier transform of it falls in Q. If I, this size is typically angstrom level. If I translate the whole structure to a much larger structure, if I talk about, so this will be maybe in the range of 10 angstrom inverse Q range, this will fall. Now if I go to a size which is at micelle, which is about say 10 angstrom inverse, this size, then this form factor will fall much faster at a lower Q range. And you can see this, it will be maybe 0.1 angstrom inverse, and you can see this form factor and fit it to get the size of this object which is scattering neutron at such small angle. So this is it's a analog of form factor that we discussed in crystallography. You can measure the form factor. Also, in this liquid medium, often we are also encountered with structure or local structure, and this sorry, this local structure is evident in this. If you see, one is that you can see the form factor fall in the lower Q region, which will give you the size, and there is a formula called Gini approximation, which tells you what is the size or rather radius of gyration of the micelle. But you can see also there is a peak. There is a peak here. This peak. This peak is actually a signature that even in liquid medium, these micelles which are moving around dynamically, they do have a local structure. So this local structure gives this peak, and this fall gives the form factor, and I can look at structures which are typically in the range of 10 angstrom to 100 angstrom. If I am able to push my Q range to lower and lower values, I can see the fall at lower ranges, and I can see larger and larger objects. If I go to a very powerful neutron source like uh, say RHF Grenoble, ILL Grenoble, you can see objects which are possibly micron size. Micron size means 10 to the power 4 angstrom. That means you should be able to push your Q to a value which is as low as 10 to the power minus 4 angstrom inverse. But for that, caution one, I need to collimate my incoming beam to a very, very large extent. When I do that, I lose neutrons. So to start with, I should have lots of neutrons, so I should have a cold neutron source. So the basic take home is that depending on the intensity and the number of cold neutrons you have with you, you can design a small angle instrument which will serve some range of length structure. In this case, in Dhruva, I can tell you that you can go from 10 angstrom to 4 to 500 angstrom size using two of these SANS machines, and they have been used for various kinds of structures, not only micelles. These are also studied to see metallurgical precipitates. They are seen for they are used to see pore structures in rocks. They are also used to see water binding in cement. So many technologically interesting work are carried out using small angle neutron scattering. So chemists, biologists, metallurgists, they tend to use this technique to a great extent. I wanted to go over to the next technique, which is a polarized neutron reflectometry, but possibly I have already overshot my time. I was trying to make up for the lost time uh, due to this internet unavailability. But I think now I will stop here because I also don't want to load you with too much of information, which will be difficult for you to digest. So next day, I'll try to start from this point, and I will like to take you briefly to the dynamics of a system, and that will come in the next talk, how we do dynamics brief examples I'll give, and these will be taken up in the module of inelastic neutron scattering. Now, I have not received your too many of your assignments. Those I am telling again and again, because next lecture I would like to discuss the answers to my assignment, which is on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, so 15 hours. So before that, those of you who want to get credit, please submit your assignments please upload your assignments at neutron course at gmail.com, because after Friday, anyway, I'll be discussing the answers on that day. And I thought that I have given you pretty simple questions, which are basically just a tour of exactly what I was doing. So today, I discussed with you the diffraction with liquid and amorphous detector, which is short range order, SANS, which is basically the mesoscopic length scale, where you do small angle neutron scattering. And what is left out is one small part, which is polarized neutron reflectometer, which I'll say briefly. And later, Dr. Surendra Singh will give you examples and take you through a more detailed tour of polarized neutron reflectometry, and this will be done by Professor V.K. Aswal. So with that, I will stop, and I will give you some time again, hoping that you have some queries. See, I cannot play with the size of an atom. A size of an atom is pre-decided. But if I want to look at the form factor for that thing, which is a Fourier transform of the atomic density, atomic charge cloud in case of excess, that falls in a certain way in Q space. And that depends on the size of that atom, because they are Fourier inverse of each other, this space and this space. And that depends on the Q. Since this is angstrom size, this fall will take you to larger parts of the Q range. Larger means relatively. It can take you to, it will take you to 10 angstrom inverse range. Whereas when I talk about a micelle, micelle is nothing but a structure using some organic molecules with a hydrophilic tail, head, and a hydrophobic tail, and they form this. These sizes are much larger, typically say 10 angstrom to 100 angstrom. So now, if I want to see the form factor corresponding to this micelle, the same experiment I need to perform at a much lower Q value. Actually, the experiment in SANS, which I showed you, they are basically trying to see this form factor and fit it to find out the size of the micelles. It is little more detailed than that, but in principle, they're looking at a form factor. And I also told you that if these micelles are moving around in a liquid here and there, they also have a local structure, because they're charged micelles. They have a, I mean, chemists will know better than this. They will attract each other or repel each other, form a structure. So along with this form factor, we have a structure. This is exactly same what we did at the atomic level. In atomic level, in crystallography, I had these peaks, I had these sharp peaks, and they are reduced by the form factor. Here also the form factor and the local structure will give me this peak. It's a loose local structure, not like a crystallographic structure, but in a time averaged way, we see a structure. So that's why their Q ranges are different. Otherwise, I don't dictate what is the size of atom, But I can tell you, given the size of atom, what is its form factor. There is a question: is there any generalized way to understand the concept of resolution in these different techniques? Yes, that's what I was trying to tell you. One is that quantum mechanics dictates that my spatial resolution in a diffraction experiment goes as Q max. Some numbers I might miss. This is what quantum mechanics dictates. So if I want very fine spatial resolution, I have to increase my Q max. If I want to loosen my resolution, that means I want to, in some terms, worsen it, make it broader, then my Q max has to go to lower side. So this is the generalized way. But now is this is dictated by the Q max. But what about the Q resolution? Because when I am doing a scattering experiment, I also want to resolve. Suppose let us say these are the two peaks. They are the two peaks in a magnetic scattering. And if I don't have a good resolution in Q, then I will see this possibly like a slight hump. And then it's difficult for me to decide. So your Q resolution dictates what structures you can see in Q space. Q space means again and again angle space in a very loose way, in a slang way. And I was talking to you about liquid and amorphous system, where I need to go to very, very, very large. I shouldn't say very, very, very large Q, so that I can decipher short range order. Ah, no access to the book you referred, so please help with some reading material. Uh, I have soft copy of some books. I right now, yes, I will try to give you some reading materials. I will. Of course, one is there. See, people have talked about various techniques at length, but the basics that I am giving you, let me see. I will try to. I have a soft. I will try to keep a soft copy. I don't know because there are all these distribution problems and all. So I can give you the sites where you can get these books.